I started to ask myself, where's Raven today? Did he just disappear? Maybe he's still around us in some form, and maybe he's reacting to what's happening in the world, talking about the state of the world and what are we dealing with, battling climate change and, missing murdered Indigenous women. And so Raven, in my version, he's kind of exploring those concepts.
With us today, we have Dr. Preston Singletary, an amazing glass artist whose work can be found in New York, Seattle, DC, Boston, and we're here to have an amazing interview. And could you just tell the people about the great nation that you come from and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Tlingit, from Sitka, Alaska originally, but I actually grew up in Seattle. So my great grandparents moved to Seattle in the 20s, and so found myself here. Growing up in Wallingford, actually. So um, I'm a work primarily with glass, but I'm also a musician.
Yeah, and I heard that you got your start at the Glass Eye Studios here in Seattle as well. And
That's right.
even before you were interested in music before your glass career. And could you tell us kind of what drew you to glass?
It was the music that kind of took root first, and I played piano, and then I played guitar. Now I play bass guitar, but in high school that was my main focus. But after high school, I didn't go to college, so I had a good friend of mine, Dante Marioni, who introduced me to the glass world and actually got me my first job at the Glass Eye. And so I just learned through, working in the production factory there, how to handle the material. Started going to the Pilchuck Glass School in 1984, just a couple of years after I started blowing glass. And so um, ended up being involved with the school on many different capacities over the years, and still to this day, I'm on the board of trustees. And um, yeah, so glass, kind of took me around the world, so to speak.
Were there any really challenging moments or, arduous tasks that you had during your time?
Well, I worked really constantly, for the first 20 years of my sort of glass career. And, I worked at a studio of Benjamin Moore, who was Chihuli's right-hand man uh, well, over the years. And so I worked with Benjamin. We worked 5 days a week. And then on the weekends, we would sometimes be able to get a day to work on our own stuff. So but there were three or four other assistants, and everybody wanted to make work, so we would share time. And I would assist my friends, and then they would in turn assist me. And so uh, that was the only access I had to really uh, the glass studio, unless I wanted to rent time, which is pretty expensive. Glass blowing is an expensive activity to do. But so yeah, I mean, I worked constantly, sometimes 7 days a week.
And the 2000s were a big year after the trip, and you had a honorary name from Elder, and you also had
Right.
your doctorate degree in 2009. And do you think that these big events in your doctorate degree kind of changed how you looked at art and how you viewed your future career?
Well, the doctorate degree was really surprising. And to me, it was kind of like validation from the Western world. But before that, back in 2000, was the you know being adopted by my mentor. And it was just our first meeting, but he saw it fit to share his name with me. And in a lot of ways, it kind of validated me as an artist and gave me a lot of confidence. That this guy put his, kind of endorsed me in a lot of ways through this process. And come to realize that it's actually a very traditional thing. In the old days, you might assume a new name as your life changes or evolves, or you might, assume the name of an ancestral, person who maybe was a house leader or whatever. And if you were going to become the leader of that house group, then you might assume this ancestral name. So that for me was, so his name is Joe David. He was a really great friend and teacher, mentor. We're still, in contact today. Um, but so that actually happened first, and that's what gave me a lot of confidence, like going forward. And when the doctorate came in, then it was sort of like, okay, now the Western world is recognizing my efforts, and I thought, so I was honored to receive that.
And are there any particular teachings or stories that kind of stuck with you over the time?
Joe David, he introduced me to the sweat lodge ceremony, and it was something that was a bit of an eye opener in terms of connecting with the native spirituality. And it's all very like personal growth, right? Things that helped me grow as an individual, and things that I could learn from that process. But the biggest part of it, I guess, is once you become a keeper of cultural knowledge, it becomes a responsibility. And that's what he told me, and so I took it to heart. I took it very seriously, and of course, the work that I'm doing and the attention that I'm receiving for it is, it brings me right back to family and community and the culture, the indigenous art. And so that is a really great place to become inspired by. At least for me, it was something that really opened up the entire world. So yeah, so it's really, there's a lot to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very involved story, but it's the long and the short of it. Yes, that's how I synthesize the experiences that I've had, and um, try to act on those teachings.
And you've said in the past that your history, is what gives your work, power, and the indigenous side of it as well. But then also you almost want to break free from this, cage of ethnic, art. And could you comment on that a little bit?
Native art has been largely excluded from the fine art world. So, we don't really have the same platform as, contemporary art, fine art realm. And so I think that it's changing. I think that we're making inroads and getting attention for what we're doing. And I mean, across the boards, between music and film and, TV and art, there's more and more attention being given to indigenous art. So I think today, though, it is changing quite a bit. So it's a really good time to be a practicing working artist. I think this is one of the easiest times in history to make a living as an artist.
How do you kind of feel about your art being, so big, and what kind of experience do you want people to get when they go to your exhibitions?
When people see the work, I hope that it prompts them to want to learn more about it, um, and that hopefully it would sort of draw people in, but then show them something too. It's really interesting now at this stage in my career, where I'm actually trying to imagine what the new mythology is like. um, you Creating new directions for Raven. Raven and the Tlingit culture, he put the world in order. He set the world in motion. He didn't create it, but he created order around it, and he placed the sun in the sky. And there's all this. I started to ask myself, where's Raven today? What's he doing? I mean, what did he just disappear, or maybe he's still around us in some form? and maybe he's reacting to what's happening in the world. And that's my own way of sort of getting into, creative mode about, talking about the state of the world and what are we dealing with, battling climate change and, the missing and murdered Indigenous women.
And if you had any advice for the up and coming artists, what would you have to say?
You never, you never really know where you might find inspiration. You have to really persevere and hone, dig deep into your own story, your own life. I know that I came to a fork in the road, where I would have gone, stayed on my path, and just kept working with glass or working with my friends, or I decided to veer off onto this other path and really apply myself, and that's when I achieved my ultimate success, by connecting into my culture, getting into my own story, and pulling that out and being very um, transparent with it, sharing it, telling the story that, how I got to where I am today. And I guess that's hopefully that serves as an inspiration for other artists too.
Back in the day in Iowa, in the 60s and 70s, when my parents, we grew up, they lived off the reservation in the Meskwaki settlement. We drive to the Ho-Chunk reservation for different events, family events, and when we pile into the